Thank you so much to our sponsor, Electrical Alliance. As a Local 26 union partner, Electrical Alliance provides a dedicated team of experts to support and advocate for their members. Continuous education keeps skills sharp. Join Electrical Alliance, where excellence, empowerment, and a bright future come together. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Build Your Path podcast. I am your host, Emma, and today I am here with Ellen Mccann. Hello, Ellen. How are you doing today?
Hi, how are you?
So good. I'm so excited to have you guys. So Ellen and I know each other because we take spin class together, which I think is the coolest way to meet other people in the industry, especially at our age. So it's felt really neat to find you as a friend and then find out like at some happy hour or something that we were kind of in a similar situation. So excited to have you here. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. I'm really excited.
So tell me, what do you do? Where are you? What's happening?
Sure. Okay. So I am a water resource engineer at Century Engineering. We're actually owned by Kleinfelder, based in San Diego. So that is my concentration. That's what I studied in school. And from there, I've kind of taken on 2 additional roles as well. So outside of my design work at Century Engineering, I am a consultant at the State Highway Administration. So I review plans that are less than 5,000 square feet and 100 cubic yards of disturbance. They submit them to me, I review them, and then they are given like an approval letter so they can go ahead and get started in the field. It allows them to not have to go through the full approval process for the plan review division at State Highway. And in addition to that, I am also a consultant at the Maryland Transportation Authority. So I work in the stormwater remedial program, working with drainage, any of their drainage assets, working with their the construction side of things to fix any drainage complaints that are submitted to MDTA.
So cool. Okay, so what degree did you get?
So I started off at so I graduated from University of Delaware, go Blue Hens, and I started as a chemical engineer. I totally thought that I wanted to create my own cosmetics line. So I knew I always wanted to do engineering just because I love math. Like, it was the only subject throughout my entire life where I was like, okay, I like this. I like a challenge, but I know there's a solution. And that's kind of how my brain works. Like I like to find an answer to something, which math and science just kind of yielded perfectly to that. So I always knew I was going to do something like that. So I started off as chemical engineering at the University of Delaware. Turns out not great at chemistry, really not good at chemistry. And I was like, this is not working out as I planned. So I actually pivoted to a different, so I was chemical engineering, then I pivoted to environmental engineering with like a chemical background. I don't know why I could not give up the chemistry aspect. I just was really set on the cosmetics. And then that really wasn't working out for me either. So I went into water resources, which was a branch of environmental engineering at University of Delaware. And it actually is like exactly what I do right now. So the major was perfect for where I ended up. And then I got a civil minor, which kind of helps with some of the consultant work I do, because a lot of that, it's water resource based, but there are aspects of it that are civil because it's transportation related.
Yeah. So how would you define civil engineering? Just because I actually don't think I've had a civil engineer on our podcast yet. So I want our listeners to know kind of what that means.
Sure. So civil engineering to me is very broad. So the way I look at it is kind of transportation based. So highways, roads, and then within that, you actually have to look at kind of the assets that are related to roads. So every time a road is built, the stormwater that hits the road has to be managed. So water resource engineering and stormwater management, which is like the type of projects I do, are kind of like under civil engineering. So when I took my professional engineering exam, it was under civil engineering, but then I had that water resource like specialty. So to me, environmental engineering and civil engineering, there's a lot of overlap. And I think that's why at Delaware, it was so easy to get you only had to I think I had to take 2 additional classes. So they really go hand in hand, especially because a lot of civil projects, if you think structural, bridges, anything like that, there is that water resource component, especially in Maryland because of the Chesapeake Bay. Like, we have very stringent like stormwater management regulations. So they really lend themselves well, and they're kind of like partnered, I would say. Most civil projects have an aspect of environmental engineering, specifically stormwater management.
Very cool. So, so you went into chemistry to start.
Mm-hmm.
How did you know? So you were into math. Was there any other interest that you had when you were in school that maybe lent you
I
to knowing you would be good at this?
I really liked physics as well. There's
Okay.
something about like equations, like seeing a situation, knowing there's applicable equation, being able to apply it and then find an answer. Like that to me is like my brain goes crazy for that. I just really like reading anything where I have to interpret it. That's my brain doesn't do well with that. Like I like to
Mhm.
know there's a way to figure out an actual answer. And I think that's how I knew I needed something that was like problem and solution. I think that's kind of how I knew. And honestly, I'm not even going to lie, I googled majors for people good at math and science, and engineering was number one. And I was like, you know what? I need some guidance, so this is perfect. And then honestly, Delaware was the best. I mean, it's the best school ever, but it was perfect because I was able to kind of, through the classes I took freshman year, figure out, hey, not great at chemistry. The memorization honestly was tough for me with all the
Mhm.
different compounds and things like that. And because I couldn't find that like exact, I know there's an exact answer, but for me it was hard to find. That's when I kind of leaned into, I think it was like algebra 2 or something of that nature, where I was like, okay, this is my jam. This is what I really like. And then it kind of just like, I followed the path, figured out what I liked, took one class, and I was like, yeah, this water thing is actually very interesting. So
I think that is the whole point of our entire podcast is like however you start is probably 99% of the time not how you're going to
yeah,
finish, but you're going to learn every single time that you pivot. You are learning like 10,000 things about yourself, about the industry, about the world, like all of that. I think like if someone were to start in an apprenticeship, find out that there's an interest in just the built environment, then they
mhm,
lean into going to like University of Delaware,
right.
checking out the engineering, right? There's so many ways that you can stack on to what you've learned in the past. Um, so when you graduated from school, what brought you to where you are now? Where's that?
So I've always, since I graduated college, I've worked at Center Engineering. We're based in Hunt Valley right now. So I got a internship there my junior summer going into senior year. So I worked there for the summer, and the great thing about the internship was that I was working on actual projects. I wasn't just doing, kind of like filler work, do this, do that, which I'm eternally grateful for, because I got exposed to what the actual process is for a lot of projects. So I was working in AutoCAD, I was working in MicroStation, I was helping actual engineers. I wasn't doing the complicated stuff, but I was helping. I was seeing specifically a project I worked on that is kind of, most of our projects are, almost all of them are based in Maryland, but it was actually at University of Maryland. And the way that we had to do stormwater management at the time is we had to shade either reconstructed impervious area to be removed, and new impervious area. And impervious area, just for anyone who doesn't know, is just any area that water cannot go through. So cement, roads, anything like that. That is kind of the basis of the stormwater analysis. So I honestly, even when I drive at University of Maryland now, like I can tell you every little piece of impervious area, because like tiny little shapes, I had to shade different colors. So, but that was like essential to be inputted into the actual computations. So honestly, it was the best opportunity. And it just kind of happened. I knew someone who was asked for my resume. I said, sure. I wasn't even thinking anything of it. And then it ended up being, so I worked there summer into senior year. And then University of Delaware has a really long winter break. It's like almost, I think it's like 2 months. It's much longer than everyone else's. So I was like, well, my parents were like, you have to do something, like you can't just sit at home this whole time. So I ended up interning again. And then they gave me an offer, which I was like, just so eternally grateful. Not great for the senioritis, I will tell you that. But honestly, it all has worked out well. June 5th, what's today, the 19th? June 15th is 9 years I've been there. So And I've
Wow.
since college. So obviously it's going well.
It's working out
Yeah,
so
it is.
well.
It is.
So you said a couple things. I think one of them that I want to lean into is building connections when you're in school and when you're in kind of your growth mode. Um, how would you recommend someone make connections that could serve them in the future?
Honestly, like I think we're a great example. Like honestly, just
Mhm.
putting yourself out there and just having genuine conversations with people. If you and I had not, like we were just chatting and it just happened to come up what we do. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of times those connections are made in situations where you're not expecting it. So my biggest advice would be put yourself out there. Honestly, there's so many if for college students, like any of the career fairs, just going and because I for some of the local colleges, I'll go and speak with students at the career fairs if I'm given the opportunity. And those are genuine connections. Like I'm not just there to like I'm there to actually talk to people and tell them about my job and like kind of answer their questions because until you talk to someone who actually does what you're doing or you're actually put in that situation, I don't think you really know like you can read a job description, you're like, that sounds great. Until you talk to someone and you're like, what is your day to day like? Or you sit with them and you're like, what is your day to day like? You're not going to get a real idea of what the industry is like. And my second piece of advice would be definitely get an internship, but don't. It just worked out for me that the one I had worked out perfectly. But actually, like listen to yourself when you're sitting
Mhm.
there doing real stuff. Like if you're like, I don't like this, don't be like, oh my god, I made the wrong decision, I'm like, what am I going to do? Try, there's so many opportunities, and but use those connections you build to kind of figure out your path. So those would be my two biggest, just be social, talk to everybody, introduce yourself to people, put yourself out there, like be your own advocate. That's half the battle, is just like speaking up for yourself and being like, hey, I'm great, I'm looking for this, can you give me an
Yeah.
opportunity? And then not being discouraged if said opportunity isn't exactly what you're loving.
Mhm.
You'll figure it out. You just have to trust yourself.
So good. So what is a day in the life of Ellen? What do you do?
So right now with my three different roles, my weeks are a bit crazy, but I kind of like it that way. I like to do the good thing about engineering. I like to do something different every day. And I think that's what's great about, honestly, my firm is we kind of do a lot of different stuff. Obviously, they're all under the same umbrella of like stormwater management, but um, I do 2 days at SHA. So I'll go down, I'll review projects, like coordinate with different individuals who are need help with their exemption letters. They have questions about it. I'm looking at plans. I'm kind of adding up the numbers, seeing, okay, yes, this works. Go ahead. So I do that 2 days a week. And then 2 days a week, I am down at MDTA, which is the offices by the Key Bridge location. And I'm coordinating the drainage team there. So I have 4 design teams that when we get drainage complaints, I can issue them out to them and they go ahead and do the design. And then I kind of am just like the coordinator. I'm helping them facilitate like with other departments. I'm not doing the design, but I'm kind of helping out with it. But I'm learning a lot. That's kind of like my newest position. I just started there in December. So I'm learning a lot. And it's also, I haven't done a ton of drainage, which is kind of cool. I've
Yeah.
done mostly stormwater management and stuff like that. So drainage is a whole nother ball game. And I'm learning a lot, which is, I loved, if that's one thing about me is if I'm not learning, I get bored. And this was the perfect like restart of kind of learning something new and kind of being like, wow, there's a whole nother side of this industry that I was never exposed to.
And I think that's another big piece of advice too, is once you're there, knowing that once you're in it, there are so many paths that you can take from
Yes.
like to always be learning. I think that is one of the best traits in a prospective employee is like, do they want to learn? Like, are they super engaged in not only what they do know, right? Because like knowledge is obviously power, but
Mhm.
being willing to take on more knowledge, I think is so special. So you are it sounds like you're working like 50% as like a scientist, like an engineer, and then 50% as a communicator, right? Like you're working with a lot of people throughout the day.
Yeah. And I have to say that is something I absolutely love. I would say communication is definitely a strength of mine, which I think has lended itself so great to kind of being an engineer, because most engineering projects are essentially group projects. And I love, like, I'm more than happy to jump on a call and talk through with people. And I think that's where I've kind of, my strength is I'm not afraid to be like, hey, let's jump on a call and talk through this instead of emailing 100 times. I'm also not afraid to admit, like, hey, I don't understand what you're doing here. Can you explain it to me? And
Right.
that would be also my biggest thing, is like, be mindful of your ego. Like, confidence is key, but don't ask the question. If you don't know, ask the question. Like, when I started, I had a notebook, and I still do this. I try to do it like more virtually, like on my computer now, but write everything down. Write everything down, ask the question, because now that I'm kind of helping with junior staff, like, when someone keeps asking the same question, I'm like, I'm like, we already went over this. I think it's impressive when you're like, hey, I know you said this, but kind of being mindful of, like, again, what you're saying with learning, like, just be mindful, write it all down. It's never a bad thing to just constantly take notes.
Yeah.
And the best engineers I know, honestly, have notebooks full of scribbles that they're like, oh, let me flip back here. On this day, we talked about this. And I'm like, wow, I'm impressed by you. So that's a big tip.
And that's kind of, I mean, that's like a really good professional lesson too, that might sound a little harsh. So I'm going to like lean into it, is really ask the question once, but don't ask it again.
And if you genuinely, like, I remember when I first started, I would ask the question, I would get the answer, and then I'd go back to my cubicle and I'd be like,
wait, that made no sense. Like,
yeah,
that is not hitting.
Yeah. And there was definitely times when I was too embarrassed to go back. And now I have to put my ego aside and be like, you don't understand, and you're not going to understand unless you actually ask further. And with this new position, I've definitely been like, no, humbled might be an exaggeration, but like, there's so much I don't know. And I constantly have to be like, ask the question. Like, you are not going to learn unless you ask the question.
Yeah. And then ask for clarification and make sure that you can actually understand it so you can implement it in the future. So you can take notes on it. Yeah. I think like being an engineer for a lot of people sounds so far out from like what is accessible. But I really think, and you can correct me obviously, but I think that if you're curious and you want to play with the numbers and you want to memorize and learn, then you can be an engineer. Like, you don't have to know it all right now.
I have so much more to learn. And I think hunger for knowledge is like the biggest thing about being an engineer. Like, do you want to continue to learn? Like, the strongest designers, like design engineers I know, are always learning, and they're always trying to do new projects in which there's a unique situation. So then they learn. So if you like math, if you like science, and you love continuing to learn, I say go for it. Be an engineer. That's my best advice. And I do think it's a daunting word, like, I'm an engineer, but really it's just, you're a problem solver. You're someone who's designing to fix a problem.
Yeah.
So,
Ellen, I think you are such an inspiration. I feel so grateful that I was able to invite you onto this podcast. I feel like the girls who are going to watch this are just going to, like, I have chills now, and I'm not going back to school to be an engineer. So like, if I was sitting in a place where like I was looking for that path, I feel like your path is such a clear vision of what a young woman could become.
Well, thank you. I'm very fortunate that my career has kind of worked out the way it has. But I highly recommend, even if you have an inkling of like engineering, go for it. Dive in, see what it's like. If you don't like it, you can always do something different.
Right. Right. And that's the key to all of it, is like, I want a life, and I want lives for my young people that are listening to this that is exciting, that you're not doing the same thing for 55 years. Like, I hope that you find interest in like 1,000 different things. So go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, like, for example, today I was climbing through a pipe, and tomorrow I'll be sitting on a collaboration call about a roadway project. So like every day is something different, and I think that's what keeps it exciting. So, I mean, I love to talk about my job. I love nerding out about engineering. So, highly recommend.
I'm obsessed. Well, thank you so much, Ellen. Y'all, if there is anything that you need on your journey, just make it out to buildyourpath.org where you can find all of our resources. And we will see you next month. Dig in and build your path.